Hello, good evening, and welcome to Business on the News. Now, businesses in the country are optimistic about the first quarter of the year because of proposed initiatives by government to improve the business environment. This is contained in the Business Barometer report released by the Association of Ghana Industries (AGI). The report also cited the high cost of electricity as a major challenge to the growth of businesses in the fourth quarter of 2016, followed by high number of taxes and delay in payments for projects. Addressing the media, AGI President James Asare-Agyei therefore called on government to, as a matter of urgency, reduce or scrap some of these taxes as promised.
The Business Barometer report expresses the level of confidence businesses have in the economy. According to the latest report, businesses are still under pressure from multiplicity of taxes. In an address, AGI President James Asare-Agyei called on government to, as a matter of urgency, reduce or scrap some taxes and take measures to solve the power inconsistency.
High cost of electricity ranked number one. Over 60% of respondents said that, look, this is hurting businesses. So this is what AGI recommends. Now, AGI is calling for efficiency in power generation, transmission, and distribution to drive down the high electricity tariff. And let me mention also that, consistent with the new government's agenda, AGI urges the new government to review the tariff structure, not to disadvantage industry.
Meanwhile, business confidence is beginning to rise from 99.0 in the third quarter to 101.6 points in the fourth quarter of 2016. The report cites high electricity tariffs as still the number one challenge for businesses cutting across almost all the regions. Yawadu Jemfi is the vice president of the AGI.
Where we are looking at, what we just presented was last quarter, January, October to December. That was being presented today. But in our communique, what we are looking at expectation from the government are maybe fivefold. The first one is the multiplication of taxes. Can they look at it, the taxes that are available, whether it's in the fuel, whatever area, and so what can be cut off, so that at least it will make the cost of doing business come down. Now, number two, you look at electricity, like we just mentioned. Of course, like I mentioned, that cannot be done in this first quarter. But what can be done from the PUR's point of view in relation with the government to make sure that they review it and see what can be cut out so that they bring the tax in the area.
The AGI Council further called on the government to expedite action on the operationalization of the Ghana Exim Bank to address the medium to long-term financing needs of businesses operating in the export sector.
Now, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta is likely to present this year's budget on the 3rd of March. Joy Business understands the minister is looking at presenting the budget on Friday, March 3. But what are the likely areas his presentation will touch on? There's more in this report.
One of the key areas that the first budget of the MPP administration will look at is the removal of some taxes that Senior Minister Yaw Osafo-Maafo has described as nuisance taxes, like the 17.5% VAT on financial services, some import duties, and withholding tax. The minister also indicated that corporate taxes will be reduced. The minister recently told Joy Business that details of this planned tax cuts will be announced in the 2017 budget. The economic policy of government will also give details of her plans to realign the allocation of some statutory funds to help meet some of its campaign promise of $1 million per constituency. Joy Business understands that the minister will announce a review of the total amount of tax waivers and grants to businesses and some individuals from 2 billion cedis to 1 billion cedis. According to persons close to the budget preparation, this, together with improved revenue from the country's oil fields, will make up for the planned tax cuts, as well as the completion of the National Identification Card, which will make it easier to identify businesses and individuals who were in the past not paying taxes.
Meanwhile, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta says he will be working with MP for Boase West, Kweku Kwarteng, and investment banker Charles Edubuahen. This confirms earlier reports these two persons were going to be nominated as deputy ministers to support the finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta. Now, moving on, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has also indicated he will be looking at the option of issuing Eurobonds to help address serious shortfalls in government revenue. This is one of several borrowing strategies that he is considering to help finance the deficit and meet some of his campaign promises. Ghana in 2007 turned to the international market to issue its first Eurobond. It has so far issued about 4, but the problem has always been with the cost of these bonds. Speaking to some journalists on the ministry's borrowing strategy, Mr. Ofori-Atta said they will also be looking at some donor support and bilateral loan agreements to address the serious funding gap.
Borrowing strategy, which is really financing of the deficit, we have a number of instruments from our own local borrowing to external Eurobond financing. If we combine that, hopefully it will increase multilateral support, which we are going to push actively. It might be that we may not need to be that adventurous outside. And then can we get in private sector investment to come in will be key.
The previous administration is challenging reports it ended last year with very high deficit and public debt because of reckless spending. Chairperson of Parliament's Finance Committee, Dr. Mark Esibe-Yeboah, has accused the NDC government of uncontrolled spending, resulting in the public debt reaching 124 billion cedis, as well as spending far more than was approved by government. He also raised concerns about concealing actual state of the country's finances to the IMF. Former Deputy Minister of Finance, Ato Forson, says these are not accurate.
You borrow to do what? You borrow to spend. And deficit means if your expenditure is way more than revenue. And if the revenue doesn't come in and you have projected expenditure that you have to pay, then you have to borrow to pay. So the purpose of the borrowing is for the purposes of ensuring that you pay for an expenditure. And that's what I'm explaining, that the bottom line is that you had expenditure to finance, you don't have the revenue to fund it, therefore you have to resort to borrowing.
Were these funds directed to areas that one would say that they can pay for itself and therefore isn't a problem at all? Or these funds were directed to just purely consumption? And that's why
these funds are directed towards the budget expenditure. Expenditures that are in the budget already.
Like?
An example, you prepare a budget, you have bills to pay at the Ministry of Power, you have bills to pay at the Ministry for Roads and Highways, you have bills to pay at the Ministry of Water Resources, Works and Housing, you have bills to pay at the Ministry of Defense. They are expenditure that you have to fund. You have wages and salaries to pay, you have goods and services that you have to fund. In some cases, you have statutory expenditure to pay. In some cases, you have quasi-statutory expenditure that you have to satisfy. And you can't tell me that because revenue is not coming, you will fail to pay those expenditures. No, you got to pay. You have to service the debt.
Away from that, the Minister Designate for Tourism, Culture and the Creative Arts, Catherine Afeku, says she hopes to engage the private sector in developing a linkage between tourism and business in Ghana. Although the tourism sector is currently the 4th contributor to GDP, Catherine Afeku believes an efficient public-private partnership will go a long way in making Ghana's tourism competitive, lucrative, and of course both locally and internationally. The Minister Designate was speaking when she took her turn before the Appointment Committee of Parliament.
As part of our strategic planning and efforts to boost domestic and international tourism, we have plans to engage the private sector in getting signages, especially in different color codes as done in other jurisdictions, to show that this is a tourist site, these are the kilometers left to get there, and also to encourage the signage visibility. So it is part and parcel of the strategic planning. Once given the nod and I assume office, it is on the list of things to do. The entire service culture requires re-engineering, and as part of our manifesto pledge, Once given the nod, we intend to collaborate with the private sector to establish a state-of-the-art hotel management training school where Ghana will be noticed for service training, kitchen, and the management of hotels.
And finally, before we go, the grace period is now over for enterprises that have failed to file their outstanding annual reports and or renew their businesses at the Registrar General's Department. The Registrar General is from today enforcing the penalty payment against all such businesses.
The directive first came into force in October last year but was suspended for 3 months to offer some respite for defaulting companies. Also, the fine has been reviewed from 300 cedis for each day of default to a monthly payment, even though it's the same amount. The acting Registrar General, Jemima Oware, has been outlining to Joy Business more flexible arrangements for defaulting companies.
What will happen is all those people who are coming to renew their businesses at that time, who should have renewed it before, say in 2016, and now come to file it, would pay the normal fee of 50 Ghana cedis, or depending on the number of years that they have not filed it. Some haven't filed as many years as 15, 20 years, but we've given a moratorium of 10 years. So if you're talking of, that's about 500 Ghana cedis for the last 10 years if you've not filed your return, and then 300 Ghana cedis for that particular month of January that you did not file. So we're talking of something like, what, 800 Ghana cedis. I'm saying all this so that people are not ripped off, and at the same time people should try and pay these monies to the bank themselves. They shouldn't pay these monies to any officers in my office, so that we are sure that the money gets into the coffers of government.
She is, however, impressing on companies the need to update their businesses in the new electronic database when filing their annual returns.
It's one thing filing the annual returns. The other issue is to ensure that your business is updated into the new e-registrar database, because anybody who wants to do a search on you online would want to ensure that you are in good standing. And that is the only way you get into the new database. And so if you just come and pay those monies and don't ensure that you've been updated into the new database, I'm sorry, it's just half of the work done, because that takes some time. You need to ensure that all your directors have the new tax identification number, the TIN that we've been talking of.
Businesses, especially sole proprietorship entities that fail to update their records, would have their business names rendered inactive in the electronic database. This means such enterprises would not be able to make any changes or update any records on their business name.
And that's all in business. Thank you very much for your attention. For more business news updates, log on to myjoyonline.com/business. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji. There's more ahead in the news. Don't go away.